they connect dots that they could never connect just in their head. But in the course of writing, there's understanding that comes, there's insight that comes, there's forgiveness that comes, and I've seen families heal.
From the Pritikin Longevity Center in Miami, Florida, welcome to the Healthier Everyday podcast, where we talk about your health, your fitness, your mindset, the food you eat, and putting it all together to create an amazing lifestyle. In this episode, we explore the power of writing your life story. Join Patricia Charpentier, founder of Writing Your Life and Life Writers, where she shares valuable insights and practical tips to kickstart your journey into memoir writing. Discover how to organize your thoughts, create timelines, and turn memories into impactful stories. Joining Patricia is Dr. Kristen Farrell-Turner. She is Pritikin's licensed psychologist, has published several peer-reviewed articles, and teaches multiple classes at Pritikin, helping guests achieve a healthy lifestyle. To learn more about joining a Writing Your Life workshop at Pritikin, visit pritikin.com/events. That's pritikin.com/events. Enjoy today's episode, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
My name is Patricia Charpentier. Most people cannot pronounce my last name. I always spell it for people. And I'm from South Louisiana originally and Ragin' Cajun. And I grew up in a little town down in the Bayou country in South Louisiana. 400 people, most of whom I was related to. I saw great grandparents, great uncles, great aunts every day. And from the time I was 13 years old, the only thing I was concerned about was getting out of that 400-person town. So I didn't ask any questions about where I come from.
About your family?
About my family, my history, nothing. And, by the time I finally got interested, I was in my 40s and everybody was gone. So I had to depend on research to be able to try to put my family history together. And it was such a loss for me to know that I had the opportunity to ask questions and I didn't, that I decided, and it was 22 years ago, I decided that I was going to start helping people write their stories and maybe answer the questions before they were even asked. So that's what I do. I started Writing Your Life about 22 years ago. And I do a lot of teaching.
And that's your business. What your business is called?
Yes.
Writing Your Life, yeah.
The business is called Writing Your Life. And I do a lot of teaching and a lot of speaking. In the past, I've edited, published, ghost wrote more than 70 books for people.
Oh, wow.
And most of the people that I work with are writing for themselves and for their families. They're not pursuing publication. So it's a great job. I don't even consider it a job. I mean, I just think it's a great opportunity to get to know people and to help them do something that's really important to them and to the people that they love.
Curious about a couple things, and I don't know if I'm going to be overly nosy here.
You can't be overly nosy when you're writing life stories. You really can't.
Okay, well, good. Then I'm going to ask the question I'm going to ask, because I think it's fascinating too. Honestly, I'm grateful. I don't want to make this all about me, but I'm grateful I have family also who have dug back quite far, actually.
Yeah.
And there could be some stretches here, but back even to the Vikings.
Oh, wow.
And again, records, I don't know how good they were. So there's maybe a couple leaps, but it's, they've gone back pretty far and then traced it eventually to England and then over here to the US. But I really appreciate the kind of work that you do, because I feel like I have benefited from having family members. My grandfather, his brother did a lot of the work, and then actually my uncle has done a ton, and my mom has done some too. Yeah, so it's really, really cool. Mm-hmm. So to find out about your family, what have you found out about yours? That's actually the nosy question I was going to ask. Yeah, so
my family started in France. In the mid 1600s, they came to Acadie, which is now Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
And so they lived in Nova Scotia for about 100 years or so. And then the British decided that they wanted the land back because they had done a lot to reclaim land and all. So the British wanted it back, bloody Brits. So they came back. I love British people, I really do. But they didn't love them at that time. So anyway,
No.
They came back in. They captured a lot of the people and deported them to all the different locations. My family, what I learned, my family escaped into the woods, and they lived in the woods of Nova Scotia for 4 years, and had bounties on their heads. And they were finally captured 4 years later.
Oh, wow.
And then they sent them back to France, which by that time, this was several generations later.
Yeah. So about what time was that then?
That was mid 1700s, 1735, I think.
Okay.
And so they sent them back to France. These people are no longer French. It's been 100 years. So it's a whole different community. And so they were there about 50 years, and ultimately Spain was settling the area that's now Louisiana and was looking for people to settle it. So my family in 1785 came on a boat called La Matie and settled in South Louisiana, and we have been there ever since. So ever since 1785, we have been in South Louisiana. And have been farmers and fishermen and all the things that they did in Acadie as well as in France.
Yeah, so I'm going to guess both in Acadie and also then in the Bayou, right, of Louisiana, they had to build their own houses. They had, they had to do all those things.
Yeah,
I mean
it was undeveloped land.
It's it's completely undeveloped land.
Yeah, it was totally undeveloped land.
Make farms and everything, yeah.
And I could see by the censuses that they were taking that they were prospering. One census, they had 1 barrel of corn and 1 hog. And maybe the next census, they had 3 hogs and 10 barrels of corn. So, those things made those people real to me. I had been given a genealogy when I was in my 20s, and I looked at it and I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And I put it in a desk drawer. Thankfully, I didn't throw it away. I just put it away. And then 20 something years later, I found it again in a move. And now I'm like fascinated. I'm tracing all of these people down to me. And then I wanted to know more. So I really did my master's thesis on family history. So I did a lot more research and solved, got information to solve some of the problems of where they were here and then they were here. How did they get there?
Right.
Yeah, and then wrote a good bit of my thesis on their story and how all the connections that I see, to how we cook in South Louisiana to how they cooked in Acadie, and just so much that the connections were amazing, even though there was hundreds of years that separated it.
Yeah.
So if everybody would write their life story, that would probably make things a lot easier for people when they're, because I think everybody's interested in that kind of stuff. So if everybody wrote their life story, the process would be a lot easier of discovering your past. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of how you approach, like when somebody's interested in writing their life story, how do you approach that process?
Well, you're totally right, because I speak to a lot of genealogy groups, and genealogy groups are very much interested in the past and how to do it. And I do a talk for them that says, don't make your descendants research you, because that's what happens is they get so focused on the past, they don't write about themselves. And then they're putting their descendants in the same position of having to research them. So I go in and I encourage people to write their life stories. And it's really not that big a deal. People think, we've all had, I think, traumatic experiences with 9th grade English teachers and red ink pens. And it doesn't have to be traumatic. And I always say, write your life stories, plural, because we have more than one story. And when we think of it as one story that has to be written, it's too big. And that's why I always talk about stories. And this is one of my books, and it's called Eating an Elephant, Write Your Life One Bite at a Time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I named it that, because you look at your whole life story and it's huge, and you think, I don't know where to start. This is too overwhelming. I'm going to go take a nap instead of even try. But that's why if you break it down, and the book is broken down into bites. So there are like 200 little bites in here. But that's how I encourage people to do it is, what's a memory you've got? What's your first memory? What was your first pet? What was that pet like? Just write things that happen to be on your mind. They don't have to be big moments. In all the work that I've done, ghostwriting, especially being hired by children of elderly parents, what they want to know is not that they cure cancer or whatever it is. They want to know, well, what did you hate to eat? Were you bad in school?
Right.
Did you get punished? It's very common. So that's what I encourage people to do, is to kind of knock the 8th grade, 9th grade English teacher off your shoulder, have fun writing. My motto for everything I do with writing is, the only way to do this wrong is to not do it at all. So I just encourage them to write and to have fun. And it might be a paragraph, or it might be a page, or it might be 10 pages. It doesn't matter. Just write.
Christian, what do you think are some of the benefits of kind of going through that process of what she's talking about?
I mean, from an emotional, psychological perspective, tons. And I'm curious too, what emotional reactions you see from people. I imagine a lot of the time quite profound, and I think just it helps in general just to kind of get your words out, kind of a little bit kind of out of your mind, especially when people tend to have, and this isn't necessarily, I know what you're here to talk about, but, have like ruminative type thoughts or just in general distressing type, just kind of in general, I always write them down, put it out there.
Maybe in terms of like regrets about something that happened in the past.
Or even that, but see it on the screen or see it on paper. And it allows you, I think, to look a little bit more objectively, not to take the emotion completely out of it, but have a little bit different perspective perhaps on things that have happened. You brought up regrets. Absolutely. Those can weigh very heavily on people, and it can help to just, write them out as a way to process those experiences. So I think there's enormous emotional benefits in writing. And then I would imagine, and I'm curious what your experiences are with what you do, especially not only the, kind of personal emotional benefits of kind of being able to process maybe past things that happened to you, perhaps then give yourself the opportunity to look at it in a different way, resolve your own regrets, heal past grievances. I mean, things that come up all the time when I work with people in therapy, but also the emotion involved for them, perhaps in doing it not only for themselves, but for their family. And I don't know always where the motivation comes from, but I would imagine, for a lot of people, that's huge. To, know that I'm passing something on. And I don't know, I'm really curious what you see in people, the emotional changes you see, or what they tell you is the impact of doing this.
I see a lot.
Yeah.
I see a lot, and all different kinds. There is, as you said, there's something about writing it. Yeah. And I've seen over and over again in my own writing, plus in the people that I work with, that they connect dots that they could never connect just in their head.
Yeah.
But in the course of writing, there's understanding that comes, there's insight that comes, there's forgiveness that comes. And I've seen families healed. I remember this one woman who wrote about her family, and the parents were already gone, but the brothers were kind of estranged a little bit. And she wrote this book, and it was an unusual thing, because then they were able to talk about the book. You know, it wasn't like they were talking about their individual lives so much anymore. They were talking about, well, in the book, you said da 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 da.
Yeah.
And it really healed those boys, you know, and it opened up conversations. And that's what I love so much about it, because when people take the risk to write some of their story and then share it with people, all these conversations start that would never have been had otherwise.
I bet. And you know, healing would be super important. And also, I wonder if you see kind of, I don't know, on the other side, so to speak, like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that, you know, and like coming together over, you know, a really funny memory or something, you know, and that people forget about. I would see that too all the time.
It's true. And, you know, we write in community, you know, the Life Writers membership I have, and when I teach classes and stuff, we're writing in community. So one person reads something, and then across the room, everybody's like, oh my God, I remember that. I had that too. Yeah. And so it's a way to connect people. I do believe that we connect to each other through our stories. And so when we take the time to write them, however we write them. I worked with one guy, he was a Florida cracker. And I love this guy. He had such amazing stories, but the guy could not spell worth a lick. I mean, there were a lot of times I had to call him up and ask him, what is this word? You know, because I couldn't even figure it out. But it didn't matter because, you know, and I think that stops people as they think, oh, well, my grammar's no good, ain't no good, or I can't spell, and it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Those are the easiest things to fix. Right. But if people don't take the risk to write them down, the stories go with them. Right. And that's just the sad thing to me. And, you know, I gave my mom this book. It's one of these question, fill in the answer kind of books. And it gave me so much because it helped me to see my mom as a woman, not just as my mom. And I think that's another thing that writing does, is when it's shared with children, grandchildren, they see the person in a different light too, which is really amazing.
Sure. And, you know, and to me, that reminds me of conversations a lot of times I have with, with everybody, but I mean, especially with young adults, right, who are in this kind of oftentimes transition period of connecting in a different way with their parents. Yes. And there's that time when, you know, it change. You're still always somebody's child and you're still always somebody's parent, but it kind of changes from the more kind of, you know, parent-child relationship where there are certain things as parents we wouldn't tell our young kids, right? But as they get older, we would start telling them more, and it's a different way of getting to know your parents and a different way of connecting. So I imagine that's very powerful.
It is powerful. And as it goes on to, like, both of my parents had Alzheimer's disease. And my mom just died in August. And that was so powerful for me to have some of her stories. And then I wrote about them. And she wasn't communicative or anything like that for probably the last year or two. But I would go and I would read her what she wrote. Yeah. And I would read her what I wrote about her and my dad. And like I said, she didn't speak, but she would listen. And I know somewhere in there, she was being reminded of who she was, even though that's not who she was at that particular moment. So it's powerful. Yeah.
What are some of the tools that you use to kind of help people overcome some of the obstacles and barriers to writing their life story?
Use a lot of things. Use the motto a lot. The only way to do this wrong is to not do it at all. This is a little book I put together. It's called I Remember 50 Prompts to Write Your Life Story. And it's a great little book to put in a bag or something. And it has a prompt like, this is advice. What's one of the best or worst pieces of advice you've ever been given? How did you know? And it goes on. And then it gives you space to write. So you can write a little bit about it, or you can brainstorm it, and then you might write a story about it afterwards. And what I find about writing prompts, and I do a free thing called the first Tuesday Write and Read, the first Tuesday of every month, where I give people a prompt, and it's online, it's Zoom, and they write in response to the prompt, and then they go off, where I break them up and they read. But one of the great things about prompts is that it will take you to a place that you probably wouldn't have ordinarily gone, but you always find something. So prompts are really good in that sense. Journaling, and I know you mentioned journaling. I always have great respect for people who journal consistently. I was a failed journaler, miserable failed journaler. I have many beautiful journals that have maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. And then I found a 5-year journal. And I don't know if y'all have you heard of a 5-year journal?
Not specifically.
It's the best thing in the world.
So how's it different from a regular journal?
Yeah. Well, it takes 5 minutes a day and it's 6 lines.
Okay.
And so you write, I don't know if I can show you this. Yeah. You write 6 lines
I see.
Here, and you go all the way through the book.
Oh, I see. So it's just,
and then you come back.
It's just that it covers the span, like the spaces cover the span of 5 years.
Yeah. Okay. And so, but what's really cool is when you get to the second year, then you can read what you were doing on that year before.
Yeah, that is cool.
And, or the third year. And I've been doing this consistently for 18 years.
Oh my goodness.
So I've got 18 years of these, and that's the only consistent journaling I've done. And what I love so much about this is because most of the time when you finish a journal, the benefit comes in the writing of it, but you don't necessarily go back to it a lot of times, or at least most people I've seen. And so this one you're revisiting every year, and it's things, especially if you're writing about daily things, it's not things that you would remember.
Right.
But as soon as you see it, it triggers it. And then it triggers conversation. And, my husband, every night, it's like, what were we doing last year? What were we doing the year before? What were we doing the year before that? And then we have all these conversations and memories that we share and all. So, and people use them in different ways. Sometimes people use them as gratitude journals, prayer journals, all different kinds of ways to use this journal. And, you can't talk yourself out of 5 minutes. If it takes 5 minutes a day, it's like you can do it.
Right.
So
I like that also as kind of an additive to like couples counseling. Obviously in couples counseling, we discuss the reasons they came in, the problems and things, but I could see that this is just being another way to connect.
Yes.
Because so much about working with couples is kind of reconnecting them because they've become disconnected. I see this as an interesting, again, just sort of, additive little piece. I like it.
How could we write, what are we going to write together tonight about what we did today or what we learned today?
And just also, the fact that you mentioned, you and your husband take a little bit of time to kind of, whether you write it together or not, but just to sort of connect and like, hey, what was our life like a few years ago? And just reminisce. And hopefully, well, I don't know if I didn't say hopefully, probably a lot of the time those are kind of happy memories. So anytime you can bring happiness and joy back into anything, but a relationship especially, that can, be very helpful.
And sometimes they're not, my last, with 10 years of my dad having Alzheimer's and then another 5 years with my mom, there's a lot of pain in my journals, and I would not trade that for anything in the world. Yeah. Because it reminded me of the difficulties of those times.
Sure.
That, it reminded me of the care that I gave to them, even though it was hard. It reminded me of the moments when they rose out of the dementia and said, call my name, when they didn't know who I was anymore. So even painful moments are really worth holding on to and keeping. And I write all kinds of things in there. And And people end up thinking you really got a good memory because I say, oh, it's been a year since you bought your new car. And they're like, how do you remember that? And I'm like, I don't remember it. I read it the night before. So people think you got a great memory too. So yeah, I am so sold on 5-year journals. I think it's just the best way in the world to journal, but I'm prejudiced too. But
yeah, well, and writing things down actually does help you remember it better. Also,
yes,
I mean, in this case, you mentioned you happened to look at it the night before or whatever, so it jogged your memory. But I mean, it's also true that the best way to remember something is to write it down.
Exactly.
So it can also help with memory overall.
Why is that?
To me, I would just guess it's a matter of repeating, because the technical term for how we restore long-term memories is called long-term potentiation, and it involves circuits, of course, in our brain that end up kind of cementing the memory. So if you have to write it down, you are again kind of repeating it. And for a lot of people, having it visual might be much more powerful than verbally repeating it to themselves again and again and again. So having it down where you are, again, you're repeating it because you're writing it, but you're also seeing it. And it can be very helpful for, this process of long-term potentiation, of creating the long-term memories in the brain.
Yeah, just in incorporating more than one sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely that too. I mean, we definitely know things like smells, for example, are very much related to memory. Yeah. So incorporating more than one sense, absolutely.
Yeah. I know when I help people to edit, I always have them, like in the programs, Word or anything, they have like a read back feature. And I always have them print what it is. And then I have it read back to them because it's incorporating 2 senses.
You're
and
absolutely
not just
right about
one.
that.
So because they can easily overlook something and looking at it, but if they're hearing it, it's coming at them from 2 different directions.
Yeah, and having to write takes time also, and concentration. And so you're concentrating on one thing at a time. So this is going to sound so ridiculous, but when I grew up in Ohio, where there are seasons, and there's a point I'm getting to, right? So here I live in Miami. I've lived in Miami since 2005, so I've been here a while. But speaking of memory and senses, in my first year or so of living here, I realized I wasn't remembering events as well as I used to. And I realized one of the reasons for that is because there wasn't and again, it's like a, I don't know, unconscious, subconscious, something back there thing that I was remembering events before in the context of a season. And it's not just that it's Christmas time. It's not that. It's that I had the memory of something with clothing I was wearing.
Yes.
And maybe not specifically like a certain pair of jeans or something, but there was this, and this might sound so strange, right? But I mean, I think it's really true. There was something about the feeling of the temperature and the clothing I was wearing, and something about the environment around me.
Yeah.
And that hit me again. And I'd lived here kind of a full year. And I'm like, I can't place events in time as well as I used to because I'm missing that piece.
Yeah.
And I've told other people that, and some people think it's strange, but I've had some people say, yeah, you know what, you're right. Because here in Miami, everything is the same all the time.
Yeah.
And there's not that external information for, I think, most of your senses, right? It's our visual sense. It's certainly touch. Smell. We don't have that information to create memories.
I know they've done studies on it. Smell is connected to memory more so than any of our senses. So I can see how that, I'm a Southern girl, so I've never lived in snow or anything, but I can see how it would provide hooks for memories that when there's a sameness across the seasons, that those hooks wouldn't be there.
Right. Yeah.
That's interesting.
So, Patricia, tell us about kind of what you're doing here at Pritikin over the next couple of days. A bit about the talks and the workshops you're going to do, and what people are kind of going to be experiencing here.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited to be here. I mean, I really am. I'm so glad and excited to be here. And the first thing that we're going to do in the talk, that's this afternoon, is we're going to look at a way to get started. Because that's usually the most difficult thing is to get started. People are overwhelmed by it. How do you start? What do you do? And so I give them some kind of things that they can do just to get started. One way to organize your thoughts where you don't have to write chronologically. The kiss of death if you try to start writing with your first memory and go forward. Doesn't work. So I show them a way to be able to write whatever's on their mind, but an easy way to organize it. And I just give them some tips about how to remember things, how to mine the memories that they have. So that's today is kind of a get started. We also look at a timeline. I'm going to help them create a timeline so they can get maybe a 35,000 foot view of their lives and just get the big picture. And then tomorrow, the session is called Moments to Memoir. And what I've seen with people is across the board for the last 22 years, and that's why I named the book Eating an Elephant, Write Your Life One Bite at a Time, because they try to take too big of a bite. They try to write the entirety of their childhood in one story, and it gets overwhelming. And then it's too general. Mm-hmm. It's not specific, so it doesn't have the impact. So in the session tomorrow, I'm going to show them how to bring a memory down to a moment and to focus on the moment that happened in minutes or hours rather than days and weeks and months and years. And so both sessions are going to be pretty hands-on. So, and they're fun. It's definitely, all of us have gotten to the point in our lives where, if it's not fun, we don't necessarily have to do it. We've had too many things that we've had to do in our lives that weren't fun. So something like this. So it ends up being fun. And then we're going to share some of the writing maybe, and that might scare people, but it really isn't. It's very fun because when somebody takes the risk to share what they've written, then all we do is cheer and applaud and clap. Sure. So, it's the best audience you could ever play to. So yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun.
Why don't you just tell us how people can find you and tell us about your company, your website, your social, if you have Instagram or anything like that, and if they're interested in writing life stories. I don't know what it is.
I'm not a big social media person, unfortunately. So I have those things, but I don't know where they are. But the way they can find me, my main website and the name of my company is Writing Your Life. And my website is writingyourlife.org. writingyourlife.org. And there's a whole story why it's an org and not anything else. But writingyourlife.org. If they want to email me, my email address is patricia@writingyourlife.org. And I run a membership called Life Writers. And everything to do with Life Writers is at lifewriters.us. lifewriters.us. So if they check the lifewriters.us, they'll find a lot. I do a weekly vlog and some blog posts and stuff. So yeah, if somebody's listening right now and a memory comes to their mind, sit down and write it. Just a paragraph. That's all they have to do. And then they will have started writing their life stories.
Thank you for listening to the Healthier Everyday podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. If you're interested in learning more about the Pritikin Longevity Center and how the physician-led team of wellness professionals have been helping people for almost 50 years, visit Pritikin.com. That's Pritikin.com.